Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome. My name's Tom Pico, and I'm the president and CEO for the Penobscot Bay Regional Chamber of Commerce. Before we dive into today's topic, I have a couple of quick items to share from the chamber. First, as we do with every event, I want to recognize our premium members who make an additional investment with the chamber beyond their annual dues for additional marketing opportunities. And our premium members, of course, are LCI, Machias Savings Bank, Eden Peabody, and Ballou and Associates, and we thank them all for their additional support of the chamber. As you probably have heard by now, if you've been on one of these before, we're continuing to use the 2020 edition of our Jewel of the Maine Coast Guide because we have lots of copies left due to COVID, but we have published an addendum that's an insert that these two pieces go together. So we have a nice little sticker on the front here that says 2021 addendum inside. So these go together, and if you need copies of either just the addendum, if you have copies of last year's Jewel that you want the inserts for, we can get you those, or we can get you the new sets together. But those are out and about, in all of the tourism visitor centers along the highway and all of those kinds of things. So we are continuing to use the 2020 guide with our addendum for 2021. I do hope you can join us tomorrow evening, Wednesday, March 31st at 7 o'clock for the premiere of our virtual annual gala awards event that we will be sharing on our YouTube channel. I'll pop the link for that in the chat here when the session gets going. But tomorrow at 7, it's a 1-hour program where we're going to present our annual awards and including our Community Person of the Year award, which of course is top secret until you see it on the broadcast. So we certainly hope you can join us tomorrow at 7 for the premiere of that. You can sit in your PJs at home and have a glass of wine and take in the awards that we have to present as we do each year. So look forward to having you join us for that. I want to, for this event, welcome Michelle Curtis from First National Bank. First National Bank is the sponsor of our Tourism Tuesdays series, and we're grateful for that. So, Michelle, look forward to having you share a quick welcome from the bank.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. We are very pleased to be sponsoring this series. We feel that it's really valuable for all the chamber members. We're proud chamber members, and we're very thankful for you and everybody that had a hand in putting this together. So thanks for letting us share in it.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate having you here. And thanks again to First National Bank for being our sponsor. So let's move into the topic for today. We are recording today's session and we'll share it later on our YouTube channel. So anyone who didn't get a chance to be here this morning can have the information. If you have questions, we're going to save the last 15 to 20 minutes of this session. That'll be about an hour for questions from all of you. And, just shoot me a note in the chat and I can ask it, or just let me know through the chat that you have a question and I'll call on you when the time comes and you can ask your question directly. But obviously we'd like for you to be succinct if you have a question so that we can get to as many as possible for those that have questions. So today's presenters are Matt Lewis and Greg Dugal, both with HospitalityMaine. HospitalityMaine is a statewide nonprofit that supports and advocates for businesses in the tourism and hospitality sector, and they have really been an indispensable partner for our chamber and our members, especially in the past year. Matt recently joined HospitalityMaine as their new president and CEO, so we look forward to hearing from him and having him introduce himself and share a little bit about his vision for the organization and for tourism in Maine. And Greg, of course, is a familiar face to many of us, and he's the Director of Government Affairs for HospitalityMaine. And when Matt's presentation is done, Greg will give us an overview of current pending legislation that could impact the tourism and hospitality sector. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Matt Lewis, the President and CEO of HospitalityMaine. Welcome, Matt.
Tom, good morning. Hello. My name is Matt Lewis. It's a pleasure to be with you, Tom. Thank you for the invitation to join. And it was not a difficult decision for me to decide to take this position with the amazing staff that we have here at HospitalityMaine, a very seasoned and veteran staff and a very engaged board of directors. I see Matthew Levin on the call. Matthew is our incoming board chair, so we'll be looking forward to that when that happens. I am learning more about Maine every day, and I've been to about half of the cities on your website, and I'm sure am barely scratching the surface in terms of the amenities and amazing opportunities that you provide people when they visit and even relocate to your area. So I'm looking forward to seeing more and learning more. My background is in hospitality and tourism, and I've been in hospitality since college. I've worked for airlines, car rental, convention and visitors bureaus, hotels, and now into this position with HospitalityMaine. And it was exactly what I was looking for. I will be honest and let you know that I didn't have any background in Maine, really. I didn't know anyone when I started interviewing for the position in the state, and I don't have a family history in Maine, although I would imagine with my last name, there may be some relations in there somewhere, but I was intrigued by the position because I had been a leisure traveler to Maine a few times. And the Maine travel experience, as you all know, is a wonderful and unusual experience here. It's very welcoming, and you see a lot of friendly faces come back year after year, and it's really a special place. So this was quite an easy transition for me. The welcome has been fantastic, and I'm hoping to sort of, with my sales and marketing background, I'm trying to find a way to incorporate that into my daily activities with the organization. So I've been in the role almost 2 months, and I would say that I've been out and about listening to our membership and meeting our board and our educational foundation members, hearing what the critical issues are. Of course, I hear that from the staff at HospitalityMaine, what the critical issues are, but I want to hear it from our members as well. And I think that you can count on me to be someone that is engaged in the state. And if there are opportunities for me to be present at some of the events that you have, please let me know. I would be happy to add those to my calendar. I think that in terms of our focus and where we will be looking in the next few months, obviously, staff shortages are a big issue for the state. We're hearing that time and time again. Greg will get into the details about that with the visa issues, but our staff, and particularly Steve Hewins and Becky, are working very hard on the educational foundation and working with the wonderful community colleges here to create curriculum for finding later high school students to consider careers in hospitality and coming to the community colleges and earning their education that way, and hopefully then continuing on successful hospitality careers in the state of Maine. That is the goal of these efforts. And last week, Steve sent out a survey to our membership about the challenges that HospitalityMaine members were facing in terms of hiring. And we got a resounding 90+% respondents saying that hiring issues were a major issue for them. And I'm sure that you're all hearing that as well in your daily existence. So there's a couple ways that we're working. Greg is working his tail off in terms of getting more visa opportunity for the state, working with the senators and the congressional leaders for that. He'll get into details with that, but you will be seeing an educational foundation announcement from our organization in the next month or two. And we're very excited about that because that may be a way to assist what seems to be a continual issue for Maine in terms of finding ideal staff and to work in our hotels and our resorts and our restaurants and things of that sort. I would say that it's becoming pretty evident as well that part of the hiring issue in Maine and across the country is that other industries are coming after long-term veterans in the hospitality arena. They're coming after people that have been in hospitality for 15 or 20 years or even longer. And like, for example, senior living centers, they are actively going after hospitality leaders and offering wonderful positions with outstanding benefits full benefits with educational opportunities, life, insurances, and a very flexible time off. And our members and our hotels and lodging facilities and restaurants are competing against that. So that is another area and another arena that we will have to fight against. So that's an important part of our efforts. For the smaller restaurants and the bars, of which there are many in Maine, they are still concerned. Okay, let me step back a bit. So the governor released her new announcements for the summer in terms of social distancing and restrictions. And in many ways, our membership will benefit from those openings this summer. But there is one prevailing area where our smaller restaurants are struggling with, and that is the 6-foot distancing. If the governor or the state would look at reducing the separation of tables from 6 feet to 4 feet or 3 feet, then some of our smaller restaurants would see a more profitable summer. With the expected influx of tourists, they would be able to earn some of the money back that they're fighting from last year, the losses of last year. So that is something our organization has presented to the governor, the commissioner, and the staff about an issue our members still face. And that is something that we will continue to fight for, even though that is not currently something that is in our favor. So that is a big issue for Hospitality Maine. And of course, we all know the unknown, that there are many issues that may sort of rear their head in the next few months that we're not even considering right now. And we learned that very vividly last year. That there may be issues that come up with, who knows what, vaccine effectiveness, or a new surge that would cause the governor to feel concerned and pare back those openings that we're so grateful to have right now. So there are a number of issues that aren't even on our radar right now that may emerge in the next few months that Hospitality Maine would have to move and be front and center with. So I would say those are the main issues that we will be looking into. I think that Maine offers such a wonderful tourism and hospitality offering. And I know that hospitality and tourism got knocked last year, both in Maine and across the country. And I just want to put in a plug for all of you in that industry and say that it's a very special atmosphere here, and it's something to be very proud of. And I'm very honored and pleased to be a part of Hospitality Maine. And I want to meet you and hear your issues. Please reach out to me via email or my cell phone. Let me know how we're doing. If there's issues that are critical to you, we want to hear about it. And let's keep an open conversation. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to meeting those I have not met in person.
Thank you very much, Matt. And again, welcome to Maine and to Hospitality Maine. We're thrilled to have you here and look forward to a chance to meet you in person.
Thank you very much.
Too, as the spring unfolds here. So, so next up is someone who needs no introduction to many of us, I'm sure, Greg Dugal, who sat in my chair a few years ago as the director of the Camden Rockport Lincolnville Chamber before the chambers merged, and a Samoset Resort alum, and has for a number of years now been with Hospitality Maine. So Greg, welcome, great to see you, and we look forward to, well, maybe we don't look forward to hearing what you have to say, but we're glad to have you here anyway, and eager to have an update. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Tom. And it's good to see so many familiar faces and or names and or caricatures on here. It's always a pleasure. I am ensconced in my headquarters in Lincolnville Center, Maine, as you can see behind me. Didn't make it into Augusta like Matt did today, but it's sort of interesting, what Matt said about things that were happening. I was earlier in the year when with supplemental budget was being worked, and we were talking about PPP, I was also working on alcohol takeout. There were a couple other things too that I was working on. And it just dawned on me that a year ago, none of it existed. I mean, that's how much has changed. So many programs have been created, so many pieces of legislation have had to be put forth to help us try to solve the problems that we're in, that you could have never dreamed the scenario up. At least I couldn't have. And if anyone could, it probably would be me, because I've been doing this probably longer than I should. But it has changed the way that everyone does business. It's changed the way that I do business. It's changed the way the state does business. Most of the state employees are not in the state complexes. They are still working from home. So probably the best place to start is, as far as how things are going in Augusta, is the makeup of state government. I think it's no surprise or secret to anyone that the governor is a Democrat. The Senate is 22-13 Democrat to Republican, 1 vote shy of a 2/3 majority. And the House is 80-66 with 5 independent libertarian type candidates. So it's a lot closer in the House than it has been in a while, which creates, some interesting scenarios. There are currently about 1,300 bills that have been printed. They're going pretty slowly. Generally, there's a Tuesday, Thursday session for the House and the Senate. Now it's just whenever they schedule it. There happens to be one scheduled for today. There really was only one other session that was scheduled, and that was when the supplemental budget was worked on. Statutory adjournment date is June 16th, supposedly. There's at least 1,700 or 1,800 bills, so we still have 400 or so bills to print. Normally, they would be telling committees to sort of wrap up at this point in time so that they can do a lot of floor work until the end of the session. But, like I said, a lot of the bills aren't printed, and I would dare say 400 or 500 of them have been printed but not been scheduled because they're just not sure what's going to happen next. So, normally where I'm at is, walking around the halls of the State House. You have, wonderful access here in the state of Maine to your elected officials, but not anymore. I mean, unless you see them on Zoom, you're not going to get much interaction. And most of the action that occurs as far as compromise and discussion occurs in the hallways. Like, that a legislator is on the Labor Committee and also on the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee, and that at some point they're going to run to go to the other committee, and if you're in the appropriate position, you have the opportunity to win the prize and have a discussion with them. But that doesn't work, obviously, in COVID world. So you're relying on people to actually reply to their emails and on Zoom calls. Which has been better than I had envisioned that it would be. So some of the issues that we're facing, most of you know that we had a session back in March that passed the supplemental budget. So whenever there's money coming in additionally that nobody knows about, or additional monies that need to go out and the budget remains unbalanced, then we need to have a supplemental budget discussion, which occurred. Remember again that the Republicans are at a fairly sizable disadvantage. So there are very few things that they can really use to be able to gain that advantage. And that 2/3 vote, like on an item like the budget, is one of those things. And so the big issue for us there was the taxation of PPP. So basically, the federal government had said initially that obviously you could take your expenses away like normal accounting procedures, but that they weren't going to count revenue. And then in the last coronavirus relief bill that occurred at the end of last year, they changed that. And they actually said, no, you can take the expenses and you can also deduct the revenue as well that you receive, so you don't have to chart that as revenue for your business. The state of Maine decided that they couldn't do that and couldn't afford it. And so they just went back to the expense model, not the revenue and expense model. And then there was a pretty serious outcry from the business community. I know there was some folks from the Mid-Coast that certainly weighed in, and from all different industry sectors. And so there was a compromise that was reached, and the modification was that anyone who had $1 million of PPP or less would receive the courtesy of both. And so the Republicans decided at that point that they were going to dig in. There were several other issues too for federal conformity, which is basically what we're talking about here, conforming with the federal tax laws. And ultimately, at the end of the day, they did prevail in a somewhat messy supplemental budget process that occurred at the Augusta Civic Center because the State House is not socially distanced well enough to be able to accommodate that many people all at once. And so it was a wee hours in the morning, which is not an unusual thing for a budget here in the state of Maine or any other state, I'm sure. And it did pass, but it left a lot of lingering feelings. And that leads us to today. Today, the legislature is convening again, and they're looking at doing the biennial budget. And the biennial budget is similar to what it was last time around, though there was a little bit of an increase the last time around, and the Republicans didn't particularly care for that. They don't care for the fact that what's probably going to happen. Normally, in almost my whole tenure doing this, there's always been a 2/3 budget, a compromise budget. So, basically, if it gets beyond the end of this month, March 31st-ish, you need a 2/3 vote because any law that's signed by the governor takes 90 days to go into effect. So if the budget isn't approved until May 1st, then you would have a shutdown of a month, which we've all seen shutdowns here at the state level. We don't want to see that anymore. And so nobody wants that. So you either need to do a majority budget, which can be done and gives 90 days for it to go into effect, or you have to do the 2/3 budget, which could occur somewhere after the fact. Due to the pandemic, the governor and the Democratic Party leaders have decided that they feel that there needs to be certainty for everybody and that they need to pass this budget with few increases and maybe deal with anything that would need to be dealt with later with a supplemental budget. Obviously, the Republicans do not agree with that because they have always been part of the decision-making process. So what everyone expects to happen is a majority budget today. Again, as I mentioned, it takes 90 days to go into effect. The only way laws can go into effect is if the legislature adjourns. So the legislature will adjourn probably sometime like when we're in bed, at least I hope I am. I'm certainly not going to watch it. And then it will get weird. Not that it isn't already weird, but it will get extremely weird because the legislature, there's only two ways the legislature can come back, and that is if they vote to do that, which I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen after a majority budget vote. And the other way is for the governor to call them in. And once the governor calls them in, they have to come in. So nobody's really sure what the next step will be. I think a lot of it comes down to the process that will occur today and tomorrow maybe, and just to sort of see how things play out. If it's a little more amenable than it seemed like it would be, things could be different, but there'll be no shortage of interesting times moving forward. Bills that are affecting our industry and just in general, because I have no life and nothing better to do, I was looking through bills over the weekend, and one popped up that I hadn't seen yet, and that is a bill to raise the minimum wage, not to 15 as we've been hearing, but all the way to 16. So it would be 13, 14, 15, and 16 by 2025. That bill has been printed. It has not been scheduled. Again, if there's no legislature, there probably won't be any committees, though I heard that if you remember last year, even though the legislature didn't convene, there were committees that actually met. I was a part and parcel to some of those. So they can meet. The question then becomes what happens to the legislation that they're discussing. So stay tuned on that. Another bill that we've been watching and testified in opposition to is the salary threshold overtime bill. So currently in Maine, the minimum salary level is 3,000 times the minimum wage, which of course is $12.15 now. So I think that number is somewhere around $36,450 is the minimum salary threshold. So this legislation initially would have raised it to 40,000, roughly 47,000, 55,000 after a 3-year period, which is extremely high for a state like Maine. especially considering the fact that you have the first district and the second district. The economics of York County are much different than the economics of Aroostook County. I can assure you of that. So that's a pretty sizable amount. There was a little bit of smoke screen and mirrors going on, and the bill was amended to change it to 3,500 times, 4,000 times, 4,500 times minimum wage. If you do the math, it actually comes out slightly more than the original bill because of the CPI factor that exists currently in minimum wage increases. So needless to say, that's something that was very difficult for our industry to be able to deal with. That was last Monday. And then on Wednesday, we had the joy of meeting once again with the Labor Committee to discuss the elimination of employment at will. There is only one state in the country that does not have employment at will, which means that an employer can terminate an employee at any time and an employee can quit at any time. It's pretty much a quid pro quo in that respect. This bill would eliminate that, and employers could only terminate based on cause. It would have to provide a 3-step warning process that would lead up to a final termination. And so the only exemption to that would be a violation of state law. But who knows what that is? You know, like if an employee comes in and they've been drinking, that's not a violation of state law, but you couldn't terminate them. You'd have to counsel them 3 times before you terminated them. It's a very difficult bill. It would change the business structure in the state of Maine forever. And it's not lost on folks. You know, some people would like to do that. And of course, we would not like to do that. And so it'll be an interesting conversation moving forward. There's been no work session scheduled on either of these bills. There's some discussion that there's some bills like this that are so contentious that they may just be carried over into next year, which I'm okay with. I'm not quite sure what the political strategy is there, because the last thing you want is to have contentious legislation or tax increases in an election year. But I guess that's going to be their problem to figure out and not mine. To sort of give us a breather on the state side, you know, going a little bit to where the feds are at this point in time. We've obviously been, as Matt mentioned, knee deep in all kinds of acronyms and dealing with, you know, the PPPs and the RRFs and everything else that goes along in that alphabet soup. We were involved in writing actually with Mark LeDuc from Senator Collins' office, the seasonal elements. There were no seasonal elements in the PPP. The PPP happened in a weekend. I spent my whole weekend in front of my little computer area here working on language to make sure that there was a seasonal aspect, because not every state has the seasonal employment structure that we do. So we worked very hard to make sure that the language is in there. It wasn't perfect. It had to be redone again, but you know, nothing happens in Washington, D.C. in a weekend, nothing. I mean, and this bill was created out of thin air and pushed through the legislature in a very, very rapid time. You know, to the bankers on the call, thank you so much for all your efforts in the respect of having to receive all of that information that was created in 2 days and make something good out of it. So you guys definitely made lemonade, and we're very appreciative of it. You know, but most of our members would not be here today without that. And, you know, not many people say that in person. The bankers can tell you that that's true. There are people that just would not have made it and are very grateful to all the efforts that occurred. So most recently in the coronavirus relief bill that was just recently passed under the Biden administration, there is something called the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. That is going to be a grant program that will be administered by the SBA. There's something called the Shuttered Venue Operator Fund that was created in January. I believe the application process, I see Paul Benjamin nodding his head. That would be something I'm sure that he would be interested in. But that has still not gone online. I mean, applications are going to be available, I think, April 8th or somewhere around there. We're hoping that the RRF doesn't take that long to materialize. I mean, that's a really good long time for people to be waiting for some funds. Of course, along with that came $1.3 billion to the state of Maine. As some of you know, you were involved with the Maine Economic Recovery Grants and the Tourism and Hospitality Grants last year. The hope is that there'll be more of that available as well, just to get people to the point where they're able to open up and really start functioning. As Matt said, it looks like there'll be no shortage of visitors coming this year. If anything, there'll be a shortage of people to service them. But we're going to be busy, and I think it will be fine. But we do need to get to that point, opening inventory, opening payrolls, things like that. So that would be helpful. Great that PPP was extended. The applications were extended until May 31st. That was a bill that Senator Collins and Senator Shaheen put forth. So big thanks to them for that. And then the other element of this that nobody likes to talk about is the additional unemployment insurance that we saw what happened with that last year. It was at $600. So literally somebody could be on unemployment making $1,000 a week. This year it's been toned down a little bit to a $300 level, but if you're at maximum state UI benefit, you're still at $35K for not working. And I'm not saying that it's an epidemic situation, but along with all of the other things that we have working against us, the demographics of our state, and also the visa issues, which I'll touch on here in a moment, it really makes things difficult. It used to be in my life, I can remember when there was an answer to things, like one answer. Nothing is like that anymore. Everything is 5, 6, 8, 10 different things that you have to solve to get to the point where you get the key to unlock the door and move forward. It doesn't necessarily even solve the problem. It just gets you through that door. And of course, visas are one of those things. Looking on the call here, I don't see a ton of people that actually probably are using visa employees, but the one thing that I would remind you is that if your compatriot, your competitor does not get, or your business in your community does not get their visa workers, then there's a good chance they'll be looking at your workers for an opportunity to make sure that they're fully staffed or even partially staffed. So it isn't a critical program. It's been something that's been going on since the 50s and 60s. Nothing new, no big bombshell here. It's just something that makes our tourism economy go round and round. It really comes down to the fact that you look at the places where they're used the most, which is Bar Harbor, the Mid-Coast, Boothbay Harbor, Ogunquit, Wells. There are no people there. I mean, Ogunquit has 800 year-round residents, and they have 2,000 hotel rooms and almost 5,000 restaurant seats. So, it doesn't take much to do the math to see where the need is. Unfortunately, currently, we still are under a proclamation that Donald Trump signed that actually banned the issuance of visas for either worker or cultural visas. It's not just H-2B and J-1, which is primarily what we use, but also H-1B. There's H-1s. There's a bunch of different visa classes that were suspended, and they weren't suspended. You would think suspended because people were concerned about health. They were concerned about just people traveling more than they should. But it really was suspended because there was a premise that these people were taking American jobs. And so that's why this was suspended. And so there's been many calls for the last 2 months to the Biden administration to end that, because none of the visas can be issued or processed until it ends. And so it doesn't look like that's going to happen because the proclamation ends on March 31st. So once that ends, unfortunately, the problems just start beginning, because most of the embassies have been shut down and I've not been processing anything. And so then it is a ramp up period, and there's some discussion and concern that immigrant visas, people who want to move here, are going to be placed ahead of the worker and cultural visas, which would be a disaster for us. I mean, there's some embassies that are saying that they won't even get to these types of visas until June or July. So the good thing is Senator King, Senator Collins, Representative Pingree, and to some degree Representative Golden are very aware of this situation. They've been advocates for years, trying to make. Senator Collins has literally written pieces of legislation that have created really good fixes, and then they get changed, and then they don't work anymore, not based on anything she did, but based on just how politics work. So the other piece to this is on the H-2B side, there were 90,000 visas that were requested, 90,000 visa workers that were requested, and there are only 33,000 in our half of the federal fiscal year that are able to be issued. But in the appropriations bill from DC, there was a caveat in there that the DHS secretary, we wanted the word shall, but unfortunately we ended up politically with the word may. So the DHS secretary may raise that cap. And so there's been a tremendous amount of pressure on Secretary Mayorkas to do just that. My understanding is that may happen here shortly. And I hope that it does, because we get about 7,000, about 5,000 J1 workers in Maine and 2,500 or more, slightly more H-2B workers. So that's like about 7,000, 7,500 people, which is about 10% of the hospitality workforce in the state of Maine. So it's like anything, you don't want to, yeah, Matt, I see your hands up.
Yeah, quick question, Greg. Any truth to, because we got indicated by the gentleman we're working with, who's kind of our agency for our J1 visas, that students that had been issued a visa and were here maybe 2 years ago are ahead of the game because they already have their visa and have been approved if they're coming back again. And we were told that about 4 of our 10 students were in that situation and have already been approved. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, actually, because they've already gotten their visa approved once before. They technically can't travel yet until April 1st, but that visa is something that they will be able to pick up and walk away with this because it's already or they already have it. The issue really with the embassies is interviews. So if you've never been here before, you need to get an interview. And that's really the process that's going to be, which, because we didn't get many last year for obvious reasons, about half of the people coming have never been here before on both visa classes. So that's a lot of interviews. And of course, the immigrants as well, anyone who would like to move here obviously needs to be interviewed as well. And there's some, one of our, and Camden is the perfect example, one of the prime feeder countries is Romania. And Romania basically they don't want anyone leaving Romania. And so the US Embassy has basically slowed anything going on to a crawl. They've had a couple of surges recently, and there's a lot of concern, rightfully so, that they don't want to send their young people into harm's way. So that's not that I'm a State Department expert, but, the ambassador to any particular, or even the consul, depending on what you're dealing with, what they try to do is work with the country that they're in and make the best relationship they can. So if they ask for a favor like that, regardless of what we think here, generally they're going to grant it and just slow the process down. And so we're seeing a fair amount of that. I had a conversation with a staffer from Senator Collins yesterday. We try to isolate the countries where this is occurring the most, so that we can at least get the embassies, to move on this when it's safe to do so. Because obviously people come in, we went through this 2 years ago when people showed up in August because they didn't, or 3 actually, because they didn't raise the cap until really late in the summer, and it didn't go very well. So we're hoping that doesn't occur again. So that's pretty much it from the federal level. A couple of other minor things. We're able, on the positive note, because, they say economics is a dismal science, but I'm believing that political science is taking over for economics at this point, because it can be pretty dismal some days. But we had a win, as well, and don't know that Hospitality Maine was heavily involved in attempting to get beer and wine takeout, because when the governor closed the restaurants and said that takeout was acceptable, she also said something to the effect of "with your favorite beverage." And so I'll tell you what, my inbox never filled up so fast in my life. It's like, what does that mean? Does that mean beer and wine, alcohol, blah, blah, blah? And so I sent an email right off to the governor's staff, and I said, look, I heard it. I hate to say it, but it sounded like, and they said, yeah, let us work on it. We're getting the same feedback. And so they worked with the Bureau of Alcoholic Beverages and Lottery Operations and came up with, in that day, came up with a directive that actually allowed for beer and wine in the manufacturer's original packaging to be okay to be sold. They added growlers at one point in time because people had tap beer that was just sitting there and it was about to expire as far as, you know, the freshness date on it. And they allowed for that. And then, of course, cocktails to go in pouches and or sealed vessels was allowed as well. So the bill that was passed, the downside to this was, you know, whenever the state of emergency ends and all of the executive orders end, that would end too. And so we had a bill in last year, Senator Louis Lucchini from Hancock County, big supporter of the hospitality industry, did a great job. And we were able to get it back in this year, and it was passed and it was signed by the governor. So that means that beer and wine, no growlers, that got taken out, but beer and wine in the original package and cocktails to go are fine until September 10th, I believe, of 2022. So you guys knowing me, I'm not going to give up on September 10th, 2022, but it did buy me some time to be able to work with individuals to be able to maybe make this permanent. There are many people that would disagree with that more than you would think. They were willing to allow the restaurant industry this courtesy, but they're not necessarily allowed to put it in statute forever. So we'll see how that all shakes out as time goes on. I know I'm starting to run out of time here. So the other bill that actually kind of went with that was not really, but it was passed at the same time, was to waive liquor licensing fees for anybody with an on-premise license for this year, which will be very helpful to people with limited funds. You know, like liquor licenses can be expensive. Not all of them are, but you know, they can be well over $1,000. So that's a nice savings. Currently, it's sitting on the appropriations table with the dysfunction that I described earlier. I was hoping that they would take it up today at the end of the process of doing the budget, but that's probably not going to happen. Nobody's going to be really happy about giving out money today, so it probably won't happen. It's like $1.6 million price tag for not charging those licensing fees. There's a bill in to require propane detectors in sleeping rooms and restaurants, any place that has actually a combustion source for propane or natural gas. Thankfully, there was a bill in to regulate what the indoor temperature would be for employees. That's not a good thing for people with kitchens. Thankfully, the committee voted it out, ought not to pass the other day. There was an idea that it might be a study bill and they would look at it, but they decided just to kill it. Senator Merrimont put in a bill to eliminate plastic straws, beverage lid plugs, and splash sticks. And it was pretty much of a everything happens all at once and everything goes away kind of bill. And we testified in opposition to it to try to get some sort of a compromise, which we've been working on with the senator and with the committee. So more information on that to come. The corporate and individual income tax increases, the individual income tax, there were several bills in, but the individual income tax on the highest bill would have been at 12.15 for incomes over a certain threshold, and the corporate rate would be 12.4, which is be the highest in the country. Thankfully, the taxation committee tabled those bills because the governor is not in favor. She actually sent a representative to speak against all the income tax bill increases except for one, which was fairly moderate. And bills that we still haven't seen, that have not been printed but are still out there, are paid family medical leave, not to be confused with the earned paid leave bill that was passed last year. There's a Republican attempt to establish a training wage and to make the CPI adjustment on minimum wage go every 3 years, not every year, which we will support, but probably won't get a whole lot of other support. There's a scheduling bill, hopefully a bill to codify that restaurants can actually charge a service charge. There's a lot of uncertainty on that right now in the state of Maine. It says banquet and club setting, and of course, that's not a restaurant. So it's been kind of determined over time that maybe that means that restaurants can't do it. And it's just really a tenuous place to be. And then there'll be a multiple of packaging type bills, fees on manufacturers of packaging, potentially fees on businesses that actually package things to use, meaning from a point of sale like takeout and those kinds of things. Again, those are very complicated and they're going to take a fair amount of time. So that may be one that gets pushed into next year. And Tom, I think I did pretty good for me. I think I'm only about 3 minutes over, so I'll throw it back at you.
Great. Well, thank you. A lot of great information and I appreciate it. So if you have questions for Matt or Greg, just either post your question in the chat or just shoot me a message that you have a question and I'll call on you. I did want to acknowledge we have Mark Winter from Senator Collins' office on with us today too. And I've posted in the chat a link to a press release that they've sent out about, as Greg alluded to, Senators Collins and King and Representative Pingree working hard on the visa issue. Mark, and I know Greg touched on a number of issues on a federal level too, but if there was anything, Mark, that you wanted to add or chime in on for a couple of minutes, we'd love to hear from you too.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, Greg did a really, really good job of covering most of those issues. I was going to talk about the alphabet soup of the SBA and all of their different programs, but I think Greg hit on all of those. And as you know, our office has been, from the beginning with the PPP. Senator Collins has been very involved in all of those. And, it was with your industries, the hospitality industry in mind, that she really was thinking of that as we went forward. And yes, Greg did work very closely with Mark Leduc, one of our staffers. Unfortunately, this whole process, I think, killed Mark Leduc. So he is now retired. He is now.
I think you're right, Mark.
He is now living his life in Florida and refuses to answer the phone when we call him. So, but as Steve Abbott, our chief of staff, said, Mark Leduc probably single-handedly by drafting the PPP program and stuff saved the country. So he went out on top. But it was a great program. It continued, and it was the classic of building the plane while you fly it, and so we created the program, got it out there from conception to law was, I think, less than a month, which is pretty amazing in any bureaucratic government setting, but especially down in Washington right now. And it wasn't perfect when it came out, and so we needed to go back and tweak it, and we've made adjustments and stuff. And I know some of the one of the issues that we're continuing to work with the SBA on right now is that if you were a sole proprietor and you had already applied for your second round of PPP, then the new rules came out where you could have applied for more money. And they're saying, no, you've already applied, so you don't get it. We're looking to try to change that so you can go back and get that increase that you would have been eligible to had you waited to apply. So we're still working with SBA on that. Lots of other things. Again, Greg obviously has a good handle on all of these issues, but don't hesitate to reach out to our office. I know you all know Chris Rector as well in Senator King's office, and we work very closely with him. But yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I'm in the Augusta office most of the time. So if you have any questions or your constituents are having issues with a particular problem, just give us a call and we'll see if we can help. But thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here for our session. So, so we're getting close to the end of the hour. I'll throw out one last call for any other questions that folks have, but I think it was a pretty thorough presentation from all of our presenters. So we appreciate all that information. But let me just.
Hey, Tom, while you're looking, can I just say one thing? Matt Lewis alluded to this, and I thought he did a great job of bringing to light the workforce development issues that we have, and the fact that we do have the Hospitality Maine Education Foundation. And interestingly enough, when I first called in, Tom said, "So how's Steve Hewins doing? How's he enjoying retirement?" And so the answer to that is he's not. because he's actually running the Hospitality Maine Education Foundation. So I just wanted to let everybody know that we actually do have a paid executive director. He's going to do it in the interim until we set up everything that we need, but we have a lot of programming around that. And Tom, I would suggest, it's none of my business to tell you what to do, but I would just suggest that at some point in time in the future that maybe you have one of these and invite Steve so that he can go over that on the hospitality side for the programming that we do have available to us. And hopefully we'll have these updates at that time as well.
That's great. We'd love to do that. We'd love to do that. So, well, thank you to Matt and Greg, and also to Mark from Senator Collins' office from chiming in. We do have one more in our Tourism Tuesday series next Tuesday. We have Rebecca LaPierre from Eden Peabody, who will be talking about employment and legal issues facing employers, particularly in the tourism and hospitality sector. So that's next Tuesday at 9 a.m. And again, the Tourism Tuesday series is brought to us by First National Bank, so we appreciate their support. You can go on our website and register for next Tuesday's session if you're interested. These are all free, obviously. So, and I think that that's going to wrap us up for today. So,
Tom,
Greg,
I'm sorry.
go ahead. That's
Just
okay.
one more thing. One thing we didn't talk about was the reopening stuff.
Yep.
I see a lot of names on here that I've been going back and forth with on information when we have it on reopening and things. So if somebody has any questions, please don't hesitate to send them my way. If I can answer them, I will. And if not, I'll try to get an answer for you, which has been pretty much my MO in this department. But there is a lot happening. I think you're going to see a lot of changes in the next couple of weeks, much like we did with opening up to other states, and some changes to, as Matt alluded to, some changes to the seated food service aspects of it. There's still weddings that are being worked on, group gatherings, and a few other things that, recreational opportunities that are going to come forth in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned, and we'll keep you posted.
Super. Thanks again. Great to see everybody, and hope to see you next week, and hope to see you tomorrow night on YouTube for our virtual Chamber Awards Gala, where we'll present our Community Person of the Year. I did pop the link into the chat for that as well. So look forward to having you join us there. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.